But the point is, they don't want their people starving to death and having to line up for hours for bread. That doesn't benefit them. They want to stay in power. And autocrats to stay in power have to do something for the population. What's preventing people from getting bread is the fact that we're keeping their country impoverished and barring them from importing basics, food, medicine. So it's like, it's so cynical. And that's why if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, and they talk about how hard things are in Syria right now, at the bottom, you'll always find a mention, maybe in passing, of the sanctions. The sanctions that helped contribute to the overall situation, when really
haven't helped. Yeah, right.
Like the sanctions should be the headline. The U.S. sanctions are starving Syrians.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, also, like you said, we don't like Donald Trump. Would we want to be punished, like have humanitarian suffering? Would we want to not have access to food or to medical supplies? Like, do we think that would help the people or the resistance? Also, it can also have the opposite. I mean, both have happened, right? Like, it has led to destabilization and overthrow, demand for change, whatever. But it also can serve the opposite. Like in Cuba, for instance, it was definitely a useful tool for. It was great propaganda for Castro to point to. Our policy with Cuba is a bit insane and not unintentionally masochistic, maybe. But what it's a great thing to point to of how much you're picked on by the.
I think Cuba was intentionally masochistic. It was. I mean, actually, there's even an internal U.S. government document that talks about that. And this is a playbook that was imported elsewhere by the U.S., is intentionally causing civilian suffering to stir up unrest against the government. That's the playbook. That's what it is. They do it everywhere. They do it. They did it to Cuba, and amazingly, Cuba withstood it. They're doing it now in Venezuela. They've done it for many years to Nicaragua, because Nicaragua committed the crime of defeating our Contras back in the 1980s. They're doing it. They're trying to do it. They're trying to do it to Iran now, and they're doing it to Syria. And they do it every single time. The only noble case I can think of would be South Africa, apartheid South Africa, where you had, I think, support amongst the black majority for sanctions against the white minority. And I think it would be valid in Palestine, too, where the indigenous population, I don't know what the poll numbers are on BDS, but certainly the indigenous population, I think, would support some sort of global action taken against Israel to get it to end the occupation and comply with international law. In the case of Syria, if you look at actual polls, it's a divided country. There is a sizable number that hates Assad, but there's a sizable number that doesn't, and actually doesn't see any other alternatives. Because again, as John Kerry said, he gave an amazing. There's an amazing audio of him speaking to some Syrian opposition activists. And he even says that we were watching ISIS encroach on Damascus. And we were hoping that the more ISIS gained in Syria, the more that would make Assad open to negotiating his departure. So Kerry is basically saying that we were consciously using ISIS to change another country's government. And then he says the reason Russia intervened in Syria is because they didn't want a Daesh government, ISIS government. That's why, according to John Kerry, Russia intervened. So John Kerry was basically saying that the U.S. was willing to stand by and let ISIS take over the Syrian government.
Right.
Who can support that? And who, if you were in Syria, who would want to live under ISIS or the other alternative, Al Qaeda? That was the next strongest force. It's insane. It's totally insane. And now, because we lost, because Russia's intervention was successful, now we want to punish the Syrian civilians for our own defeat. That's why I say that anybody who supports that is a sadist.
Right. No, when I said masochist, I meant like self-defeating with Cuba. Like it didn't even serve the purposes. It wasn't even good for capitalism. That's what I meant. But no, it's definitely sadistic. I mean, I guess to be charitable to Kerry, which is barely charitable, still is a totally sordid, unacceptable thing. But one could think like, oh, well, this will be used to pressure Assad to negotiate and help a government that's not necessarily ISIS or Al-Qaeda to come to power. Which, again, that's not okay. But I'm just saying to, like, the best view we could have of that, right, is that it would be used as leverage.
Yeah, but it's like, what kind of a sick government tries to use ISIS as leverage? Imagine someone trying to use ISIS.
Yeah. Right. I agree.
Imagine someone trying to use ISIS as leverage against us. Like we're gonna watch as ISIS rolls in on Washington D.C. And when you're ready to go,
it's totally unacceptable and unconscionable. Yeah. No, it's. I mean, I'm not defending or justifying it. I'm thinking that. I'm just saying that's that's the the least sadistic. It's still not okay. But I'm just like it. Yeah. Just wanted to give that, not extend that olive branch at all, but like make a kind of, to concede something to them, but only to then further, I'm trying to cover all our bases, in case someone comes back and is like, well, that wasn't what it was. Anyway, I'm gonna get smeared as a Carius, forget a sadist. Don't want to be called a Carius. That's far worse.
Oof,
just kidding.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there also opposition to Assad, like anti-Assad opposition that still doesn't want regime change?
Of course.
Or Al-Qaeda or ISIS?
Yeah, of course. Of course. And honestly, the only people at this point who pretend otherwise are a bunch of losers on Twitter who spend their time harassing people like you and me, harassing you for the crime of talking to me or Romeo or Max Blumenthal. The war is over. They lost. They were on the side of.
To give them their due, they're not just those weirdos on Twitter. Like some of them actually are powerful in like the, NGO or the council world. And they did cancel, like, they've had some success. I mean, they didn't get Useful Idiots canceled, but they got, like, Max's book events canceled, They have an effect. And they do make people, I think, they make people, like, there's this ick factor, to go back to Matt's point on this, but.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. But it's like,
By the way,
It just speaks to how brittle we are as Westerners. That, and I include myself in this too. That it's like a schoolyard mentality. Someone calls you a name, and that has the effect of intimidating you to the effect where it governs your professional decisions, especially working in media. I've fallen victim to it. I didn't get involved in this issue until relatively recently. The dirty war in Syria turns 10 next year. So I get it, but it just speaks to how brittle we all are. That like, meanwhile, other people around the country, other people around the world are subjected to bombings, sanctions, death, real life consequences, and we're concerned about and we're concerned about being called names. And so now, honestly, when someone calls me a name about this issue, I welcome it, and I actually. Because it speaks to just like, it speaks to the fact that I'm doing something that's challenging their sadism. So good. I'm glad to be called a name now, and I only regret that I didn't get involved.
You're a thorn in the side of empire.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't give myself that much credit, but it's like
I said that, you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't saying that in a woe's me or woe's Aaron or like, keep us in your thoughts way. I was just saying this as like, it's not just harassment online. Like I think we need to kind of acknowledge that they have that it's not just online. Like, again, not like Max is out there crying for himself, but like, they do get book events canceled. Like, it speaks to, you talk about it speaking to a brittleness, but it also speaks to, I think, a scary phenomenon of cowardice, laziness, not wanting to look into something, a kind of McCarthyite mentality, which, again, I don't think, I also think that when you look into it, it is this like watershed moment, right? Where like at first maybe you don't want to look into it. I mean, speaking for myself, I kind of want to do